Hi, my name is Nicole. Welcome to my channel, Travel to Money. In this video, I will share with you about my first visit to Rome, meeting up with a couch surfer, a quick trip to the UK, and about the importance of an international driver's permit. Plus, I'll fill you in on how I first started dreaming about buying a home overseas, all thanks to the little village in Italy. If you are new here, I have created this channel to help you learn about how to travel, adventure, and have fun on the road to financial independence. I have spent the last few years traveling the world. I bought and paid off a house in Spain. I've worked all kinds of side jobs, and I have used all of this to help me move toward financial independence. I believe that the road to financial freedom can and should be fun. I hope that you'll jump on this journey with me, no matter where you're starting from. When we left off in the last video, I had just begun my stay in the little village of Artenna, Italy. I liked the house I had rented on Airbnb, which cost me just under €700 for 31 nights. I mentioned in a previous video that I tend to plan my travel where I can get the best accommodation deals, and this was far less expensive than staying in Rome. Unless I'm looking for a quiet retreat, the next time I would do one of two things though. I'd either pay a little more to stay in the city and avoid the hassle of transportation costs and time, or I'd rent a car. That brings me to car rentals and international driver's permits. I had been planning for travel for 7 months before taking off for Europe, and not one single time did I read or watch anything that told me about an international driver's permit. If someone had just told me, I think my story would have been much easier. You see, I wasn't planning to drive, but at least I would have had the option. So what is an international driver's permit and how do you get one? Basically, it is a little booklet that lists all of your original driver's license information and then translates it into 10 different languages. You don't have to do any kind of driving test or anything, and it's so easy to get. If you are from the US, all you have to do is go to a AAA office, take your driver's license and 2 passport photos with you, fill out the application, and pay $20. That's it. You'll walk out a few minutes later with your permit. You can print the application form on the AAA site if you want to fill it out in advance, and they can also take your passport photos for you when you arrive for a small fee. I had been feeling desperate for a car during that first week in Italy, and that's when I learned about the need for an international driver's permit, which I didn't have. From all the blogs I read at the time, I would be able to rent a car without the permit, but if I happened to be pulled over by the police, I could risk fines or even going to jail. I would hope that that isn't likely, but I didn't feel like risking it. I ended up risking it later in Spain, but we'll talk about that in a later video. Since I was working during the week from home, I would only have time to visit places like Rome on the weekend. So on my first Saturday, with my eyes still looking a bit funny, I took off for my first day trip into Rome. I took the bus to a train station in the next village. I bought a ticket from a machine and patiently waited for a train to arrive. I boarded the train, and after a while, I was looking at my GPS on my phone when I realized that I had taken the wrong train on the wrong side of the tracks and was actually going away from Rome. At this point, I had already been through several stops. I got off at the next stop, but there was nothing really there, and decided I would find a place to eat and use the bathroom. I walked around this small village and mostly just remember seeing a lot of street cats. I found something to eat and went on trying to figure out how to get back to Artenna. Trying to figure out how to get back turned out to be much harder than I thought. It took me most of the afternoon to figure out a bus that would take me to another small village where I could catch a train back. The bus driver explained to a young man that was a passenger, and this young man offered to help show me the train station as he needed a train in the same direction. We walked into the station and he helped me purchase my ticket. Just as I finished the purchase, he said that the train was arriving and that we had to run. This young man was tall with long legs, and he took off with me trailing behind him. We ran up some stairs, ran the bridge over the tracks, and then back down more stairs to jump on the train just in time. I was, of course, about 10 seconds behind him. He told me exactly how many stops until I would arrive back at my initial departure location. At this point, going to Rome was out of the question. I got off the train and waited quite some time for the bus to come, but it never did. I walked into this little village, found some pizza to eat, and then decided I would use GPS to try to walk back to Artena. It only took about 10 minutes of walking to realize that I couldn't safely walk the road. Part of the road was cut through rock, and there was no shoulder. The road was windy, and there was just no way to walk it safely, seeing that I would probably be run over by a car. I walked back into the village, and at this point, it was starting to get dark. I was so frustrated that I'd spent the entire day lost, and now I couldn't figure out how in the world I was going to get home. I thought I'd have to find some sort of hotel in this village. Just then, I happened upon 2 police officers who didn't speak English, but some tourists from the UK who spoke Italian stopped to help me and translated. They all helped me for several minutes to find the number of a taxi driver. They called him for me and told me how long I would need to wait and where he would pick me up. Italy has Uber, but not out in these towns, only in the big cities. The taxi driver was nice, spoke English, and gave me his number so I could call him if I needed him for future rides. It was also nice that this spared me most of the walk up the mountain. I felt like a failure at this point, and there was no way I had the energy to try again the next day. The bed at this particular Airbnb was not very comfortable. I have lower back issues in general, and the next day when I woke up, I bent over to pick something up when I had a shooting pain that left me crumbled on the floor, afraid to move. This had happened to me before, so I knew I was in for at least several days of limited movement. I lay there on the floor for at least 10 minutes, realizing there wasn't even anyone I could call if I needed help. The next couple of days were mentally hard for me. I still didn't have vision in one eye, and I was struggling just to walk or sit without major discomfort. I remember having a conversation with my boss that really made an impact on how I would continue to see my travels. He told me, "Nicole, if you need to come home and get well, do that. Don't feel like you have to make some sort of major decision about traveling or staying home." He was basically saying to give myself some grace. When unexpected situations arise, I have continued to carry that conversation with me. The following weekend, I decided to try again. I had been communicating with a guy named Dario on the couchsurfing app. He was going to meet me at the train station and take me on his motorcycle throughout Rome. I know. Not everyone has my level of risk tolerance, but strangers are just waiting to be friends. He turned out to be much nicer to me than I could imagine. After it took me 2 hours longer to get to Rome than I had anticipated. Talk about embarrassing. He waited for me even when my phone wasn't working and I couldn't communicate. Once I finally got there, he picked me up and started showing me around this beautiful city. We visited a church, a massive garden, and went to have a coffee and some olives. Dario was working on his English. We had a funny moment when he was telling me a story, but couldn't figure out the word for something important he was trying to describe, and we eventually just gave up on the story. He also told me that my eye looked cool, so he was pretty much lying because I definitely looked like a crazy person. He brought me safely back to the train station, and this time I had a much easier time getting home. A few days later, my eye was improving, and I found out that my friend and her adult daughter would be traveling to the UK because she was singing at an event. I needed to see familiar faces and have a hug from people I loved, so I booked a cheap flight to Birmingham, UK for a quick 3-day trip to see my friends. I so needed this. After not feeling well for my entire first month of traveling, this was just the reset that I needed. We had a blast taking the train into London for a day, shopping, and we even spotted William and Kate driving by with their motorcade. What more could you ask for on a quick trip to London? I had never met the owners of the Airbnb I was staying at in Artena, Italy, so I had left the key under the doorstep where they had left it for me when I arrived, just in case something happened to me while traveling to the UK. When I came back, I walked into the house and could tell that someone had been there. I realized that the heat in the house wasn't working, and I wrote the owners. It turns out that somehow they had realized that I had left, and they came into the house even though most of my things were still there, and they turned off the gas line that controls the heat. They didn't see my message until the next morning, so I had an absolutely freezing night in the house. I was pretty furious. I felt that if I was paying to rent a house for a month, there is no way they should have entered the house without notifying me or to have cut off the gas without even having the courtesy to send me a message. I suppose it was poor communication on both our parts, but this is one of the things about renting an Airbnb. Not everyone is experienced in customer service, and each person does business a bit differently. One evening, while I was just hanging around the house in Artena, I was thinking about how much I loved the uniqueness of every little house on the mountainside. I wondered to myself how much one of these houses might cost. I used the life-changing resource Google and found that some of these little homes in Artena were going for as little as $25,000. Now, the ones that cheap needed a little work, but my gosh, $25,000 for a house in a beautiful village in Italy? I had no idea that homes anywhere in the world could be that cheap. I was thinking I had found something 1 in a million. I learned over time that there are many beautiful places around the world where you can buy a home for the cost of a Volkswagen Golf or a Honda Civic. Why was no one talking about this? There are certainly groups of people with this information, but I don't think the everyday person really has any idea that the cost of a home can be so affordable. That quick little Google search would be an inflection point that a year later would lead to the purchase of my home in Spain. It's kind of funny that when we learn something new, we often have no idea the journey that it will lead us on. I'm certainly thankful for Google. It has provided me with an education and a life that I couldn't have even dreamed of. In the next video, I will tell you about the long weekend I spent in Rome, the beginnings of the next leg of my journey in Greece. I'll tell you about the bank I choose to use while traveling and why you should never stick a waterproof phone under the water, ever. If you have enjoyed this video, subscribe to make sure you don't miss the next one, tap the like button, and join me on this ride where travel and adventure build financial freedom. Thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to see where your dreams will take you.